Welcome to Access Europe for September. This is our 43rd meeting, and we're very pleased this month to welcome, fresh from Access DevCon in April, Adam Waller from Texas, I believe, isn't it, Adam?
Minnesota now. I was from Texas, but
No,
yes, moved
you must have
earlier
moved
this
since
year.
I asked you. Right, who is
Yep.
going to be doing a follow-up presentation on his version control add-in, with the focus today, as the title says, on why it's also important for sole developers to use version control in order to keep track of the changes they make and so on. The website, and we'll give you this page again later. For this, it's on GitHub. He's got a free Access add-in, MS Access VCS add-in, which you can get from that address there. And as you will find out today, it is easy to use and incredibly useful. The PowerPoint presentation will be available soon after this meeting as well. And Adam, if you would like to take over, I will let you introduce yourself properly. But welcome to Access Europe.
Well, thank you very much, Colin. I appreciate that. And let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the session that we had at the DevCon conference earlier this year. I had a chance with Philipp Stiefel to kind of compare a couple of different options when it comes to using source control, version control with Microsoft Access, and had a great time with that. But as we looked over some of the feedback from that presentation, one of the things, there were a lot of people that enjoyed it, appreciated it, but then there were also some people that felt like, well, I just work as an individual developer, so this doesn't really apply to me, which makes sense, because most people, when they think of version control, they think of it in the context of multiple developers working in collaboration on a project, which is a very powerful feature of it. But today, I really wanted to highlight specifically some of the real power and tools and options, things that it opens up, even just as a single developer. If you're the only one that works on that project or multiple projects, how this can actually be a tremendous benefit to you in your workflow. Again, this is a free add-in. I'm not trying to sell anything. I know this has really helped me in my development experience and workflow, and I just hope it can be a help to many of you out there. And I also just want to mention, just by way of introduction, to the Access VCS add-in that I've kind of maintained and developed. I've done a lot of probably most of the development on it, but it has also been the work of many others that have contributed some really excellent parts and pieces to that. So just to give credit where where credit is due there. Let me just start out by saying about 4 months ago at my work for the organization in Texas there, we came up with an issue. I have a system I developed for tracking meals using barcodes and scans for the staff, and then people that are part of the programs and such. So it's tracked tens of thousands of scans and meals and bills them appropriately to different departments and such. But about 4 months ago, that somebody contacted me and says, "Hey, is there something going on with the way it's calculating tax on these meals?" And so I looked into it and discovered, to my surprise, that it was it was not correctly calculating the tax for some of the local meals that were done there. And so there were some complex rules I'd worked into the system. And I was like, man, what happened there? And so I started diving into it, and this is where version control really was just made the difference. Because I had those records from those commit messages, I was able to identify that it was actually just over 2 years prior to that I had made a change, per some direction from our finance department, and kind of did it hastily. It's kind of embarrassing, but I kind of made an obvious oversight in the code, and I could see it just right there as exactly what it was. I was able to go in and to fix it and take care of the issue. And so, that even if I was just a single developer working by myself, that really highlighted to me again the importance of why it's helpful to have that history of what's happening in the project. As we work on an Access database project, one of the things that we run into is the memory constraints. Not so much on my computer; I can just add some more RAM to that, but my memory constraints, which it's not so easy to add to that. A database project is something that grows in complexity as it develops and expands, and you have business rules that you integrate into it, and those can be very very complex. You got these edge cases. Okay, well, it does it this way most of the time, but if you have this particular thing happening, then you need to do it this way. So you're building in all the code around those particular edge cases. Well, then obviously things change, the needs change, and finance wanted a report that looks like this. Now they want one that looks like this. Now they don't need that report at all. They need this one that's over here. And so all of that is adapting over time. Well, as your database grows more complex and there's more to it, now it starts to slow you down because a quick change is no longer a quick change. You can't just jump in there and make a quick change because you got a whole bunch of other stuff you got to think about. Okay, is there something I'm forgetting here? Is this change here going to affect this change over there? And you don't want to be running in circles chasing your tail on fixing this bug to reintroduce this bug to and I think probably as developers we've all been there. So that's one of the challenges that you make, and so that kind of discourages the innovation. Well, hey, wouldn't it be neat to add this new feature or be able to develop this into the project? Well, when you've got something that feels like this gigantic Jenga tower, and it's like, I don't want to touch any of those blocks. You know what? It works right now. Let's just touch whatever we have to in order to keep it running. Well, and that's good. It does, make the system a little bit more stable probably, but it also discourages the innovation of being able to really move forward with new ideas or, branch things out. So that's, as you work on that, what do you how do you handle that? What do you do to try to manage all different things that are happening over the life cycle of a project? Let's say you're working on a major refactor with your project. You're working through it. Your head's down in a deep, involved process, and then you get this urgent bug fix. Okay, well, the production database you've got out there now, there's this problem. So you go to jump over to fix that. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, of course, the way that we solve this problem is we make a copy. And so you go over to your folder with your database copy and try to figure out which one it was that you worked on last. Obviously, we probably all been there. It becomes an unmaintainable challenge with that. And where did I change that code? Was it in this version or that version, or where was that at? And after a while, you kind of feel like you're just spinning plates and just trying to keep everything running. And it's the load that you're feeling is incredible. And that's what I want to talk about today. When you look at the sports side of things, it was on November 5th, 1989. The Green Bay Packers were facing their big rivals, the Bears, Chicago Bears, at Lambeau Field. They had this tight game that was going on. They had just a minute that was remaining. The Packers were down, and their quarterback, Don Majowski, threw what looked like a game-winning touchdown to Sterling Sharp. He grabbed it. I watched the video. They grabbed it in the end zone. Everybody would cheer. However, the judge threw a flag on the play and said that it was an illegal forward pass and nullified the score. Well, you can imagine the reaction that's going on in the stands. So the Packers challenged the call. What are they going to do? Was he past the line or wasn't he? And so what did they do? They went back to the replay and they watched. In fact, for 4 agonizing minutes, they were up there in the replay room watching what happened from all the camera angles that they could see. And after reviewing the relay, they came out and they said, you know what? We're overturning that call, and they awarded the touchdown to the Packers. They came around, they did their field goal kick. They made the kick there, and they got and they won the game at 14-13. So it was an incredibly close game, incredibly close score, and in fact it was so became known as the asterisk game because I think the Bears put a little asterisk by the result of that game for years later. they weren't sure they quite accepted that. But the point of that is they had a way to go back and look at it and see what happened. And, in my case with that issue with the sales tax calculation bug, I wasn't so concerned about who did it. I mean, there was only one of me that was working on that project, so I knew who did it. But the bigger concern to me was what happened? How did I mess that up? And that's where having a commit message helped me understand not only what I did, but also why I did it and what initiated that. And, I was able to take some lessons from that to, try to avoid those types of mistakes in the future. Now, just taking this another direction, if you go to the doctor and you walk in and your doctor, you sit down with your doctor's probably got something in his hand. It's going to be a clipboard or it's going to be an iPad or something. He's going to sit down with you and they're going to go over some things. Why does he do that? Well, he probably has 50 or 100 patients, and they're all different people. They all have different needs, and probably he's not going to remember that 6 months ago you came in, you had this pain in your hip and you're trying to work with that. But when he sits down, he looks at his clipboard, he can see exactly what they worked on last and say, oh, how's that hip doing? Is that still hurting? And he can go right to exactly where you left off. Now, this becomes really important when you have a lot of different Access database projects you're working on. How are you going to remember exactly where you were at to kind of shift your focus? Well, I haven't touched that system in 2 years. But if I take a look at that commit log, I can see exactly what I was doing 2 years ago. I can see the very code that I changed at that time. And it just helps me, just like that doctor with his clipboard, to see exactly where I was at when I would last worked on this project so that I can jump in, hit the ground running, and be able to move forward on the project. So what we're really looking at here is a powerful combination. We all know that Microsoft Access is a very powerful tool for rapid application development and being able to create and develop databases. But what we're looking at here is being able to go beyond just Access itself and to integrate some additional tools that just multiply the power and the flexibility of that. So just to kind of boil it all down at a high level, we have this combination of the Access Add-In, which generates text-based source files for your entire database project. Instead of being this black box of mystery inside, we have text files that represent every single component that comprises that database. And then you add that to a VCS service like GitHub, and that's what gives you your linear history of being able to see what changed over time. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. The VCS add-in, the one that I've created, and then Philipp Stiefel has another excellent add-in called Iverc, and there's a couple other options out there. But the main purpose that they do is they export all those database objects, your tables, your queries, all those things to source files. And those provide you the text-based change and audit trail that you can look at over time. This also gives you, the ability to look at many different types of objects. So in the add-in that I've created, obviously Microsoft Access has a built-in tool, or it's kind of an undocumented command to, save as text. And that's kind of the basis through which most of these add-ins and tools were built upon. And that does kind of the basic idea of saving as a text file. But what I have done with this add-in, and I'm sure Philipp has done with his or others, is you're going beyond just the files I saved to include other types of data that are maybe not saved, through those save as text that don't necessarily have that. So like your saved print settings or hidden VBE, attributes, some of those command bars and toolbars, Forms 2.0, documents is a little hard to save that as text, doesn't have some of the native commands with that. So what I've tried to do is just add in as many as possible, just to have as comprehensive as possible in the coverage of what would be exported as text files, and that's where people have been able to contribute suggestions and ideas with that. Well, not only do you export it to text files as that one direction, but you also have the other direction, which is to build from source. So you can take all those source files that it has generated and be able to build your database from scratch, just from those text-based source files. This add-in's perhaps a little bit unique in that it does not use a binary stub. The original Microsoft SourceSafe add-in that it did, had a binary stub. So a lot of the add-ins that were made subsequently kind of utilize that idea of, strip out all the forms, reports, and those objects until you have this binary stub, and then you add those things back in. But the one that I've developed doesn't do that. It just has everything from those straight text files. Then other thing I like about this is an Access database is this binary file. It's like a black box. You really don't know what's in there until you really get into it and take a look at it. When you have your source files all saved as text, you know exactly what's there. You've got all of your source code right there. You can search it, you can view it. There's no surprises about what's there. Even from a security standpoint, it's just nice to know, okay, this is exactly what I've got in this database. So then in addition to that, you also have the option to merge source files into your project. So what we're talking about there is rather, a full build of your project, if you have a very large complex database, might take a little while to do, might take several minutes if it's a really big database. But the ability to merge those source files, maybe you just changed a few files or your colleague did or something. And so you want to just bring those into your project. Merge allows you to actually just merge, and it will scan and find those change files and just bring those in. So it'll just bring in a couple modules instead of, recreating every single query in your database. So that gives you some great options there on the GitHub side. And I'm just using GitHub as an example. There's obviously other types of source code repositories, anything that can handle a text file, but it's got an efficient way of storing the objects. It's kind of like your backup with incremental changes. You don't need to back up the same file again and again and again that hasn't changed. So it stores things in a fairly efficient way. Then the commit history, and this is really powerful, is where you can add those developer notes about what you want to describe about what changed, and just put in notes not only what you did but why you did it. Can be super helpful when you're going back trying to understand something. And it also gives you a familiar tool set for, branching and merging. And I would guess there's probably a range of different levels of experience and familiarity with GitHub and, Git or other, systems that do, some of those terms like the branching and merging and source trees. And, there's a lot of different things. We won't go into the technical aspects of that in this presentation, but it opens up the ability to use many of those tool sets. With GitHub, you can also create free private repositories, which is really helpful. You also have GitLab as another option. That's got some great free options. The neat thing about GitLab is you can host it locally. So if your company doesn't want some of that data in the cloud, you can host that GitLab instance for free locally. So that's what we do for some of our internal projects that are a little bit more sensitive. So again, just any other text-based version control system can work in this. I'll just use GitHub as an example for what we look at today. All right, well, that probably sounds really complex. And I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information, making this sound difficult. So let me give you some encouragement that this is actually easier than you think. And this is really where I have worked with the add-in to make it just as simple as possible. I really wanted to put the cookies on the bottom shelf, so to speak, to make it where you can come in and just jump right in and be able to turn a database into source files. So what I'm going to do here, just for sake of example, just to kind of show you what I mean, if I take this little Northwind database, this is just the a sample Access 2010 database, and I want to create that as export that as source files with my add-in installed. Which is very simply just download it from GitHub website, and it's got its own built-in installer. You don't have to fiddle with trying to install it as an Access add-in. You just double-click it, it'll open, and then install. But I can just come over here and I can click this one button. Let me zoom in a little bit just to make that easier. So you got one button right here, export source files. I click that button, and then it'll pop up with kind of a wizard-based interface, and it's going to go through my entire project and export all the different components in that database into text-based files that I'm able to utilize at a source file level. So let's see, what does that actually look like in after doing that? And you can see that it's created this new folder. By default, it just creates the name of the database .src or source, and in here you can see there are a number of different source files. Most of the files are JSON format, just to make them really easy to edit and work with. If you'd like to do that, see what they are, compare changes. Then there's folders, for things like queries. For example, you've got a SQL file you can look at, the more native Access exported file as well. So it just gives you lots of options. Tables, you've got your your table as a XML, you've got it as a a SQL representation just to easily see those changes. So if I edit this in Notepad, for example, that file, I'm bringing that over. You can see it's just an easy to follow SQL representation of what that table is. And I don't change it in here, but it just helps me to see, okay, I added a column and it was text column, something like that. The actual XML file is what it's going to use when it imports that file. So that's where you'd see the more detailed things about properties under columns and those kinds of things. But anyway, all that to say, it's going to generate all of that you saw with a single click. So that just gives you a great option to export those source files. The next time I export it, you'll see it'll scan. Just took less than 2 seconds to scan. There were no changes, nothing to export. So again, just you're working along, just periodically you just click export files and it's going to drop those into that folder. So that makes that really cool. You also have options that you can take a look at. For example, in this particular database, I want to go ahead and save some data from the tables themselves. For some of the things I'm going to demonstrate here, we're going to rebuild this database from source. So I want to include the table data as well. In a split, backend, you'd have probably different ways that you would approach this. But so I'm just going to tell it to do XML format for each of these tables. So again, I don't recommend using this as a backup. It's not really designed to be a backup of your database. It's more just a way of, you might want to be able to export, maybe you've got a table that has some of your navigation, your menu configuration or something like that that's pertinent to the structure and design of your database. Your data backup is a separate thing that's not necessarily something you want in version control anyway. But okay, great. So now I've got that. That's been exported. And so if I just jump back to that folder here, well, I can actually use the toolbar right here. I'll jump into the source folder and I can see there's a new folder called tables, and that's what actually stores the data. And so that's in XML format for the data for those tables. So that's all exported. So going on from there, you've got this build from source option, and what that looks like in this tool is, again, just as simple as a click of a button. So I can click this button right here, build that database from source. Yes. Click OK. And what that's done is created a blank vanilla database, imported all those different things from the database right down to the the properties and the forms and the relations table. All of that stuff is imported in. And then it finishes that. It's going to go ahead and initialize the forms, make sure all the colors and everything is all rendered properly. Done. So now if I run the auto exec on that database, I can see I've got a fully functioning working database. So in order to really fully appreciate what that just did is, literally you could take and just delete those 2 files. So this is the backup it created. Anytime it does a build from source, it's going to do a backup. So you've always got a copy of that just in case something happened. Then you just rename it, get back to it. But you could delete this file right here and be able to just select that folder, build it from source, and it would build everything that you needed to have that database. So it just makes it super simple. You can grab, clone that Git repository from anywhere, pull that in, and off you go. The other great thing about that is you can build any version of it. So maybe I want to go back to the version that maybe this customer is using this particular version. Well, I can go back to the very commit level that they were at and be able to build that specific version so that I can test out and replicate particular bug that they're dealing with there. So it just makes it really powerful to be able to build from source and to do that with any particular version that you want. So let's take a look at what does that take to to get started. And again, with the Philipp Stiefel back in DevCon, we did a very fast-paced presentation because we had a lot we wanted to cover in 50 minutes between 2 programs, and so we raced through that. And hopefully, people were able to play it at halftime or something to to actually follow what was happening. But since we don't have that same time pressure crunch today, I want to take just a a few minutes just to show you what does that look like, as you kind of get started with the database and kind of adding this to version control, preparing this. And by the way, Colin, if there's any specific comments or clarifications, feel free to jump in, interrupt me there. But otherwise, I'll keep on going until we and take more questions and input at the end.
There's 3 questions about exporting different types of things. We know the answers to some of them, but you might want to just comment. So the first question was about exporting database properties and settings, for e.g. those in the options. We know the answer is yes. Do you want to add any comment to that?
Yes, so it's going to export the database properties, both the DAO, database properties, as well as I forget off the top of my head, but there's a couple different types of properties, and it does export all of those. So as far as I understand, it is comprehensively exporting all the database properties for a database.
P. Graham asked, does it export linked table specifications?
Okay, yeah, great question. Yes. So what it does for linked tables is it exports a JSON file that has all the information needed to link that table back into the database. I used to also provide a SQL representation of that linked table, but decided later that was probably better not to do that, because that's more something you would want to do on the back end, table, or separately. It wasn't really specific to that particular front end side of the database. So yes, linked table, that's stored as JSON information. So that's an example of something that's just not natively exported through the SaveAsText command.
I'm fairly sure I saw that you had relationships and similar items like that being exported. What about object dependencies?
Object dependencies, how would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, if you will have, let's say, one particular table will have 6 queries, a form, and a report dependent on it. What you get in the database tools dependent objects section, I can't remember what the exact name of it is now, but basically it will tell you what objects depend on another object and what objects it depends on. Does that make sense? It's a two-way process.
So if I remember right, there's a screen where it kind of takes a moment and updates that dependency information in the current database. So I don't have a specific object that exports that, since that's something that Access kind of is able to generate on its own from a database that has been built from source.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions so far.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. All right, well, let me demonstrate how to, and again, here's a supported objects. You can take a look at some of the different things that are there. That's all on the wiki page of the repository. As you saw when I demonstrated, I can take that database and just click that one file and it'll export, a subfolder with all of its text objects. That's all great, and that does your text files part of it. But what we're really interested is seeing the linear history on something. And that's where you want to utilize the power of GitHub or GitLab, or you can do a local Git install as well. Maybe you've got your own Git server at work or something. But the main point is you've got to Git, and we won't get into all the nuances of distributed version control and that type of thing in this particular presentation, but you can do what works best for your company. I'm just going to demonstrate kind of a simple way to do it, and then you can kind of build from there. So I'm going to go, I'm logged into GitHub here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to just click on, my name there, and I'm going to go to your repositories. And so that's where I've got my repositories listed here. And so I'm going to click this button here to create a new repository. And then I'm going to call this one VCS example. Okay, and then I can give it a description if I would like. Good to spell it correctly. Call it Northwind Traders 2010. Okay, now this is an important thing. I just want to take just a moment to comment on this choose visibility option here. Is who can see and commit to this repository. So by default, it's going to do a public repository. If this is a database you're working on for a client or something internal, you probably don't want that as a public repository. So just make sure that you go ahead and just select private repository. That way you can get to it, or anybody that you share that repository with can get to it, but it's not just publicly out there. And that's really the only thing that you need to do as far as adding something there. So I'm going to just click Create Repository. And so if I zoom back out, and then I can see I'm now in the VCS example repository. Now there's no files or anything in it right now. So, that's what we would expect at this point. But now we're going to clone that repository to my computer. So to do that, you probably are going to want to use a tool for utilizing Git. I really like GitHub Desktop for that. GitHub Desktop is a free program, provided by GitHub, obviously, but it also works with GitLab and some other Git-based repositories as well. So it's a super user-friendly tool, really easy way to get started in there. I could just click one button. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. I can click Setup in Desktop, just one click and be right there to create that repository in GitHub Desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just to kind of illustrate here. So now what it's done is it is switched over to GitHub Desktop. It's a free program again here. So it's going to create this. And by default, it's going to use the path that you commonly use for it. So it's going to call it VCS example, and it's going to be in a local path of VCS example. That looks great. I don't need to change anything there. I'm going to just click clone. So then it tells me it's cloning it, and then it has finished. So now if I take a look at this, repository right now, there's nothing in there. I can click this button here to show an Explorer. And that's going to just open up Windows Explorer to show me what's in this repository right now. So I can see right now there's nothing other than just a little .git folder that's in there if you have hidden files showing. So what I'm going to do now, so I've got this local clone repository. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a copy of my database into that cloned repository. So I'm going to jump back over to my database, and I'm going to drop my Northwind database. I'll just drop a copy of it. Okay, so now it's got a copy that's in there in that folder. Now, I don't really want to, even though I can click here and see there's a file that I could commit, I don't want to commit the binary file. I mean, that's the whole point of this, is we want to commit the generated text files from this. So I'm going to double click on this database to open it up. And I could log in. I can see I've got a fully functioning database here. So then I'm going to go to version control. I'm going to export source files. So I'll just do that one button click here, and it's going to go ahead and export the source files. And then it's also going to detect that I'm using a Git repository. And so it's going to add some default files here, a .gitignore and a git attributes file to my project. Super helpful. That's going to just right out of the box is going to help you with some, some specific things to ignore, like ignore the binary files. So you're not committing that. You're just putting in your actual, database files. So now if I take a look at this, I can see, hey, there's a bunch of files. Perfect. So now those are ready to go in. One thing that I wanted to just point out here is that forms, by default, I've got it so it actually splits the forms into two files. One is your layout side of the form, and then the other is the actual VBA code that's saved in a .cls.class file. So and then we'll get to that more later, but that's really helpful, really important that does split that out into separate files. So I'm going to just come over here, and I'm going to just call this initial upload. And then I'll commit those files to the main, so that commits them in the local Git repository that I got there on my computer. And then now I've got the option to push that up to GitHub. Okay, so if I minimize that and go back to my thing, if I just refresh this page, I can see there I've got it. My entire database exported to source files, and I've got that source folder, and it's got all my files right in there, ready to go. I can click on it. I can look at my code. It's all right there. Super simple to get started. And now you're ready to go. You're ready to start making some changes, in your database, and then to be able to So I'm going to make just, again, I don't want to take a long time on this. And I apologize about the, I like working with a black background, but I'm sorry if that makes that difficult to read from a contrast side. But so I'm just going to add a comment here. I'll just say, create a new inventory ID. And I'll hit Control S to save that. And then I'll close my VBA editor. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to export source files. And you can see it just exported that one module, the one thing that I changed, super fast, very, very easy to go. If I switch over to GitHub Desktop, I can see, oh, there's a change. Okay, created a new, comment in there. All right, now I need to, go ahead and make a change. Well, hey, look at this. Copilot will even help me write a little message if I don't want to take the time. So, one click, now I've got a nice little comment. Sure, that's great. We'll take it. We'll commit that and change and push that up to origin. So again, it commits it locally, pushes it up to to my project. So now if I jump back to the kind of root folder of it, I've got, hey, here's a new change that was just made. And I can see the commit record that I made with its description. I can click on it. I can review the files that were changed. So again, just from keeping it streamlined, the goal here is that we don't want to make it a complex process to be able to use a tool like this. So you're literally doing your normal development and just periodically going to, to clicking the button to export those changes and then pushing it up with a commit message. So, how much time you spend between those commit messages, what you write in those commit messages, that's all up to you and what's going to work best with your workflow, with your, what you come up with as your particular preferences for your environment. Also in GitHub Desktop here, I can also see the history just a click away, and I can see, here's code changes. I can see my, commit message, all those details. So just, a nice linear history of what's happened and what changed in my file. So that's just a kind of a real simple example of what you're doing. Now, if I want to take that file, I've got those source files that I want to build this database. So I'm going to click to build from source. Sure, let's do it. So I'm going to click to build from source. And the first time you build it, it's going to do a full build. So it'll, build everything. Actually, build from source always does a full build. And then a merge build is what we'll look for any changed files. So go ahead and initialize those forms for me. Perfect. Okay, so that's done. It's built that database from source. So I can come in here. Okay, so I can see, I've got a problem here. I don't have any data in my database, and that's because I, made that when I exported from source, I didn't check to add all those tables to part of the export. So no problem. Let me demonstrate. How do you get back? How do you rewind? Oops, I made a mistake on that. Okay, no problem. I'm going to go to Northwind. I'll just delete that to my recycle bin. I'm going to just rename this file. And so here's my database, the backup it made just before it built from source. There I do have the data. I'm going to go to version control, go up to the options. And then I'll do that same thing where I'll come over here to the table data, and then I'll just tell it to export as XML. And I'll save and close. Now, because I did a change to the options in how I'm exporting things, it's going to go ahead and it'll do a full export when it runs this export here to make sure it covers any changes I made to those options. So it's going to export it, and this time you can see table data just exported the table data as well. So now if I go to build from source, I can click on that. It's going to import that, the different components to my database. Import those forms, table data, relations. like good stuff. It's going to go ahead and initialize those forms, basically open them in design view in a hidden way so that it fully initializes all the layouts. Good, finish there. Okay, so now I can see, here's all the table data. So I'll just make a note, add table data. Okay, I'll push that out there. Okay, so now we've made a change. I can look at that history. I can see what's happened, and I've got a database now that I can build right from source, and make changes. I can review those changes. Jump to VCS example. I can kind of see I've got 3 commits. I can look at this on the web side of things as well. So if you're not at your computer, you can still see that on your phone or whatever you're working with there. So jump back to that repository. So that's kind of a little run through of some of the basics of creating a repository, copying in your database file, exporting from source, committing those changes, building from source. Just to make a comment on those commit messages, I had the chance to get a private pilot license a number of years ago. Haven't flown a whole lot, but that was a fun experience, but learned a lot about, the FAA and the way that they require meticulous records for anything that you do. If you work on a engine, now I didn't do this side of it, but people that take the training as a airframe and power plant mechanic, they can do maintenance and things on aircraft. But one thing that is required is that they write a note, a description of exactly what they did on that aircraft. So you have a logbook that goes with that airplane, and it stays with the airplane if it's sold or goes anywhere else. And that has a clear linear record of everything that's happened to that aircraft. And that's super valuable, super important for just maintaining the safety and efficiency of the aircraft. So it's a similar kind of thing with your database project. I mean, a lot of these are mission critical systems, that it's really important to those, to your clients, to others, that it's treated in a really good way. So again, just tools that make that easier. Now, can you imagine trying to reconstruct that history with no logbook? The NTSB would not like, finding a plane and not having a logbook to be able to trace. It's nice to be able to go back and see. And again, I'm not so interested in the who as I am the why. What happened? How can I, learn from this and go forward? So let's just talk about some of the powerful tools, because this really opens up some pretty incredible things when it comes to your database, your project. So I wanted to highlight just a few free tools that you can use to analyze and look at things. You may be familiar with some of these, just in case you're not. So everything is one of my favorites, and it's like the instant file search that Windows always needed and never had. So if you want to find like oh yeah, I had a splash form that I used. Oh, great. A few seconds, you notice it's just instantaneously, finding, and that's out of, 1.2 million objects that it's, searching. So I just love the ability to be able to find things very quickly using everything as a tool there. Another helpful one is called Doc Fetcher. So because you've got all of your objects exported as individual files, everything works really nice to find those files that you're needing. But if you're actually looking for some code within a file, then that's where Doc Fetcher comes in. So this is a free program as well. So what you do is you just basically build a search scope, and you put in all of the file extensions for the types of files, like your .bas and CLS and SQL and all that kind of stuff. And then from that point, you can just come up here and you can be able to just quickly, and again, it's almost instantaneous to be able to find things in code or in queries. And since you've got everything exported as source files, you're able to quickly just locate things. So it's like, okay, I remember I had a function. I remember kind of what it was, what it did, but you can just type in a word or two of what you're looking for and then just instantly be able to find that. So that's a tool I really enjoy. And again, the more projects you've got in, export as source files, the more powerful that becomes. So you're probably familiar with WinMerge or a similar type of a thing where you can, compare a couple of files. So let's take a look at. So if I want to take a look at the difference between the employees and customers files, I could right click on that, and then WinMerge, and then I could see some differences. So in this particular case, there's not a whole lot of difference. But it's just a nice way to highlight that. And then I've got that integrated into the add-in as well. So which you can all pick VS Code or a different tool if you like, but it lets you be able to compare. But not only can you compare just individual files, you can also compare folders. So if I was to like rename this and export another copy, I could compare those two folders and see the differences, just drill down very quickly to those individual files. That can be super helpful if you have one of so let me jump back to where I was. If you've got one of those really fun projects like I illustrated earlier, where you got tons of different versions of files, well, you can export them as source, and then you can do a WinMerge across those two and quickly identify what are the differences between those, just to kind of get your feet on the ground quickly on that. Well, going from there, there's something else that is just incredibly powerful when it comes to what you can do now that you've got your code exported as text files. And again, we're not talking about anything with team collaboration here. We're talking just you as a developer working on your own databases, your own projects. And there is an incredible amount of open door of possibilities that you have ahead of you now that you've got everything all exported. So I want to just highlight just a few of those and kind of just to give you a little taste. And again, we don't have time in this presentation to go through the details, but if I jump over to Visual Studio Code, and then I'm going to open up my project here, and I'm going to go to some of the source files. So I can go to here's a module here. So I can take a look at this, but you notice what happened when I just clicked on that line? I've just got a history of, oh, that line, that was changed 5 years ago from this particular commit. I could take a look at that. That's from a free add-in called Git Lens Inspect. You can install that for free. You can take a look at your project and you can just be able to see exactly when things were added just at a glance. You could compare the changes. I want to see the changes between those things. There's just you can use some of those powerful add-ins from Visual Studio Code to be able to analyze and look at your database and those files inside. But it goes even beyond that. Not only can you use some of those add-ins to kind of see a static view of when you did things in your database, but let's take a look at something else. So I'm going to open up Cursor. So Cursor is an AI-powered code editor. So I'm going to open up a folder, and I'm going to go to, let's see if I can jump to this folder, okay, to our VCS example. So I'm going to grab that folder and open that up. So now I've got this folder opened up within Cursor. So now I can see here's my, I can see my relationships, I can see my modules, all my stuff is in there. But now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to actually be able to utilize some AI tools. Can you summarize this project for me? So here, in kind of a real-time thing, it's going through and it's reading all of my source files. It's taking a look at how the different parts of the project. And now just in a few seconds, oops, still going here. So I can see just some incredible helpful information. Now, can you imagine taking your client's database? Let's say they've got a brand new client, a new project, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? Can you take over this project?" Well, literally, in just a few, just one little command there, summarize the project details, I'm getting really helpful information to help me quickly get on board and understanding this project, what it does. Let's do another example here. So let's say I'm doing some work for a client. I want to do some work on it, but I want to make sure that I'm actually kind of staying consistent with this project. So I'm going to just say, can you analyze the coding and naming conventions used in this project and create a summary document I can provide to the developers working on this project? Okay, now I haven't actually run this, but I'm thinking that it should do a good job at it. So it's going to take a look at all the code and kind of how I've created things. And what I'm hoping it's going to do is give me a document that I can hand to my developer and say, okay, here's kind of the conventions I'd like us to use with this project, but can you utilize those as you do this? So you can see it's going through reading all of that. Now after reading it, it's going to create you notice it's probably summarizing some things, first 100 lines of this and that. So now it's creating this document called coding standards markdown. That sounds pretty cool. Okay, so now I've got a new file that I can take a look at. So that sounds really exciting. So I can go up here and I can click on that file. Here's my marked down. So I'm going to click on that and see, does that let me open preview? That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so that, as you can see, in just a few seconds, looks like we're using Pascal case modules. Okay, queries. Looks like they're using this particular thing. Here's how they're doing error handlers. Here's how they're doing. So I just generated all of that from my project, just from a couple commands using Cursor. And again, there's other IDEs, other tools out there, but just to show you the power of being able to utilize AI-powered tools, and it's kind of like putting my hammer and my screwdriver into the toolbox and pulling out the power tools. Now I can analyze, I can work on, can you imagine refactoring something? You could do the same thing. Not only can you read information, you can actually change things like, improve the comments on this project or something. I won't take time to do that now because I know we're running out of time. But after you've done that and you accept those changes, now you have the ability, if I jump back to GitHub Desktop, so I can see I've got a change, I've got a new file. So just save time, we'll let Copilot create a description for me, push that up there. Okay, so now I've got this thing. Well, if I was making changes on my actual code database, then I could come back into my project right here and I could click this merge build. And that would take those changes that AI just helped me work on, modify, and then click that, merge build. It would scan, didn't find any changes right now, but it could take those and it would merge those right into the database. And I've got those ready to go. And I've got that kind of safety net. I've got a review where I can look at those changes, make sure it's doing what I want it to do, adjust them, and then, test them out, compile them, and take off from there. But you can just see the power and the potential of what's behind that. Take a database of messy spaghetti code, document it, refactor it, all of that becomes possible because you got things exported to text files. And then at the at the end of the presentation here, you'll be able to download this from Colin's site, but there's links on how to find some of these different tools and resources. And again, you can easily find them online as well. But anyway, just hopefully that gives you a little taste, kind of whets your appetite for some of the power that you can experience in version control, even as an individual developer, in addition to what you can do as a team. So with that, Colin, I will turn it back over to you.
Adam, that was absolutely amazing. It got better and better. Or it started well and it got amazing at the end. Can I just the add-ins you showed at the end there were incredible, and I've not seen most of those before, but they were absolutely amazing. As is, of course, your own add-in, which I knew about already. There, I'm going to roll it back though. Lots and lots of reactions here from everybody is applauding you. I don't know if you can see them,
Oh, thank you.
and well deserved. Right, I'm going to roll it back to the earlier questions here. Just after we stopped last time, Stefan Hanover asked about exporting custom ribbon specifications.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. There are some other people that have actually been able to jump on the add-in project, and that's the beautiful thing about being an open source project. All of us are working on different types of databases, different needs, different systems, and so I wasn't using a lot of custom ribbons, but some people definitely are. And so, yes, just in the past year, there has been some really good work put forth to export custom ribbons. So I would say that is probably 99% there. Latest versions, you can test it out and use it. There's probably some things that will still be, fleshed out going forward. But yes, that is part of what it can do.
Brilliant, thank you. Tim Finch asked a long time ago, hopefully I'll get this right, whether you uploaded the Northwind file to GitHub in order to do the repository work. Does it need to be in GitHub to do that, or can you just do it from your local copy?
Can I possibly just,
yeah, sure.
Thank you. You copied the AccDB into the .git folder, and then you ran the convert to text files, and then you said it now integrates with GitHub Desktop. Does the AccDB file have to be in the .git folder, or did you just do that for speed in the presentation and you can leave your AccDB in your normal dev folder structure, but it will put the text files into the .git folder for GitHub Desktop to find?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. The add-in does support that. Out of the box, the default approach is that it takes and exports to a subfolder under that database, wherever it's located. But you can certainly change the export path, and you can even include what do they call them? Some system variables or user variables in that path to be able to create, custom paths of where you want that exported. So yes, you absolutely can export that to any folder that you want. I don't know if I mentioned it clearly during the presentation, but the Access database file itself, like the .accdb, that file is not uploaded to GitHub. That's not stored in the repository. That's just used as my working file that I develop with, and then it's just the source files that I actually commit to GitHub or GitLab.
Thank you very much.
Right, I'm going to read a comment by AntC, which I think reflects the sort of comments that most of us feel. He says that after more than 30 years of Access development, he is at the twilight of that development, and he thinks most attendees here have been around as long, which is probably true. The value of the tools that Adam has described is immeasurable. I can't describe the amount of energy I've expended in those 30 years to track system change, not nearly as successfully. I'd recommend that any sort of developer never underestimate the value of this session and its content. I agree with that 100%. I think that he put it better than I could have done. It's absolutely amazing. And Hugh's followed it up with a comment about the links of your add-in to modern development tools and AI. Absolutely wonderful there. Right, Neil Sargent has a knack of focusing on the most important parts of the presentation. Could you reopen your PowerPoint to the picture of the aircraft mechanic, please?
Sure. All right, give me a moment.
Keep your microphone off, please, Neil. Right, we can all decide for ourselves. If you didn't see Neil's comment, right, we'll find out. Oh, you're wrong, Neil. You need new glasses. He thought it was a dead pigeon in front of the plane.
Okay, I can see how that would.
Yeah, I can as well.
So...
Right. Anyway, he needs new glasses. Don't trust Neil with your coding. He can't see. Right. Anyway. Right. Neil, would you like to
what is it though?
I don't know. It's a bit of machinery. Looks like a microphone of sorts to me, but it obviously isn't that. Or maybe it's a bird feeder or something like that to attract the pigeons. Do you know what it is, Adam?
That's a good question. To me, it almost looks like an owl decoy that you would set up on top of something to keep the birds away.
Yeah.
So I could imagine if a plane is just sitting out in a field that they might put that on top to to reduce the time spent cleaning the wings before you fly.
I don't know. Rather than me scroll back and forwards through the chat here, is there anyone else who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Please put your microphone. I'll call on you rather than get you to put your hands up. Olaf was quickest.
Yeah, I just posted my question. Thank you, thank you, Colin. I'm running the version control system right now while watching. Okay, I admit, but I noticed that after exporting a complete project and trying to build from scratch of that project, the linked ODBC tables fail if they are not available. They are not created anymore. Is that known? Is there a
Sure, yeah.
workaround?
So yeah, that's a great question. So in order to be able to link a table, I believe the table has to actually exist and be reachable. So what I would recommend in an environment like that is to, do your VPN connection or whatever you do to make those tables available remotely, and then go ahead and export from source so you get that full set of all of your files, and then be able to build from source. Make sure you get a full build, on your project. Kind of test that out before just running with it. But then from there, you can work on it with potentially you can work on parts of the database that don't involve those particular linked tables, and you could do that offline or independently, and then be able to just commit those specific files, without having to have those links available. I don't know if I was
Yes,
if I
yeah,
touched
that was clear.
correctly.
Thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Sure.
Brilliant, brilliant. Any other comments? Nobody else's microphone is on at the moment. Right, no other questions? I think I've covered all the questions in the chat. You said all of those links will be at the presentation, which will be available on my website later. Before we go any further, if you'd like to turn your microphones on and personally thank Adam for that amazing presentation, please now shout at the same time. Right, it was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Woo! Well done,
Wonderful.
well done.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
You understood all of that, didn't you, Adam?
I might have to play it in slow, but
Yeah, get your AI tools to decipher it all and split it nicely. Right, Hugh's made a comment. Hugh is one of our younger Access developers. Not a question. Can you say as somebody maybe younger who spent his year? Hugh, would you like to read it out? I think I'm losing the gift of speech.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's not a question, but just a comment. And as someone who I guess might be younger than some of the rest of the crowd, I don't know. I'm 40 years old, but I spent most of my career working in various startups on what I would call pretty cutting edge tech, or at least we tried. And we always would begin using Git or other version control. I've come to an Access project in the last year or so. Adam's plugin provided a vital link to the tools that I was already familiar with, and also allowed me to tackle an incredibly tricky job where I essentially had 100 versions of the same MDB lying around, and I had to try and work out what order they came in chronologically, and then work out what the differences were between them. So that's actually reconstructing a Git repository where there wasn't one to begin with. And actually, yeah, Adam's tool made that possible. So it's incredibly useful. And thank you again, Adam.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Adam and Hugh. I think both of you are the youngest people here, probably, and you are certainly both adding huge amounts to our development work here. I'm going to take over the screen again and just provide the link to the article on my website, where you will find, once Adam passed it on to me, the presentation with all the links to all those goodies that he showed at the end. And if you haven't already done so, please do download. It's free. I don't know whether it'll always be free, but it's free, and it is certainly well worth the time and effort spent in learning that. It will save you immeasurably in terms of time later on. Further reading here, Mike's got an article about version control. Mike, I think that's not just Adam's, but also other ones as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's actually linked to all my articles that are tagged with version control. So there's 42 articles there. Some of those that cover Adam's tool.
Cool. So that's the meaning of life, I think, 42. Anyway.
Yes, that's right. I can't write any more now.
Yeah. Right. Sorry. Thank you, Mike. Right. Okay. We're going to move on to next month. Marcus is a new presenter to us from Germany, and he's going to be talking about different sorts of custom dialogues and notifications. Marcus, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marcus Dieterle. I'm involved in improving Microsoft Access application, especially user interfaces. Because in addition to robust database, a modern and intuitive operation is crucial today. That's why I started the article series, Let's Make Access Sexy Again. By the way, I don't wear a red cap. Colin noticed me and asked if I would like to present my custom dialogs and mini notification, and I'm very blessed about this, as it allows me to share the experience and improvements I have gained with you. So imagine this. You have been working on an Access database for months. The logic is perfect, the performance is right, the security is top-notch. Then you show it to your customer, and the first thing they see is a gray message box from the 90s. It's like presenting a new Porsche with beetle rims. So who is truly satisfied with the Access default dialogs? Who hasn't always missed being able to display tables, images, a link to a website, or simply formatted text in dialogs? These standard dialogs are ignored and dismissed with a click. This leads to errors, frustration, and in the end, unnecessary support calls. And I don't want to exclude myself from this. I'm guilty as charged. So why my custom dialog? My solution combines modern design with high user friendliness for the developers, as easy to use as the original ones, but more powerful, informative, attractive for users, and your communication with the user will get the attention it deserves. They will not just click it OK. However, there are also reusable templates. This can be created or customized using integrated editors. There is also an interface to an online HTML editor built in. In addition to the message box and input boxes alternatives, there are also dialog boxes with using a combo box or list box. The data sources could be a value list or even a SQL string. The columns width can also be adjusted. There are also advanced features such as auto close, a button delay, or a do not show again checkbox. But it doesn't always have to be a dialog box to give feedback. Often one of my many notification is enough to give the user meaningful feedback. In my next session, I will demonstrate my custom dialogs and mini notification live. This will show you how you can go from gray to great with a little effort. I look forward to an exciting exchange with you and hope you will be there.
Thank you ever so much, Marcus. I wish I could go from grey to great, but I think it's a bit too late for me personally here. Anyway, right, you can see, if you can't see what my hair's like, you can see it now. Right, anyway, thank you, everybody. If that is all from everyone, I'm going to thank Adam again and look forward to seeing Marcus next month. And have a lovely evening, all of you, and we'll see you in October. Bye now.
Thank you.